Hello, today I'm going to talk about keystone species and sea otters. When you're first introduced to the idea of food chains, so how energy and matter move through an ecosystem, we just start off with basics. We tell you that sunlight is captured by producers like plankton or trees or grass, and then one thing eats those producers, and another larger thing eats the next thing, and so on and so forth. So students are introduced to food chains when they first start learning about how energy and matter move through the biosphere. Producers capture energy from the sun, so like the plankton here, and larger organisms eat smaller organisms up to the apex predator. So that apex predator in this case is like the shark. It's the one at the very top. But this is a little simple. It's a very straight line. So let's go a little bit more complex and look at food webs. Food webs show a more complex and realistic view of how matter and energy move through the biosphere. And you can see that here in this image, right? There are many things that are being eaten or eat other organisms. So a good example is this kelp bass, and all these arrows that go to the kelp bass are things that it eats. If you look at an arrow away from the kelp bass, it's what could eat the kelp bass if it dies in this particular case. So just more detailed. Keystone species have a bigger impact on their environment than their population numbers would suggest. So that's what we're going to look at a sea otter as being a keystone species, because even though the population size are relatively small, it has a huge effect on this ecosystem. Okay. We've got a map here showing some of the trading posts along Alaska, Canada, and the Pacific Northwest here. Historically, sea otters could be found along the Pacific coast from Alaska to California. Sea otters were extensively hunted for their pelts in the 1700s and 1800s. Population numbers crashed from overhunting. So all of these populations here were hunted close to extinction, but not quite at extinction, because their pelts were valuable. They were made into hats, they were made into coats, and became fashionable in Asia and in Europe. After the 1700s and 1800s and the population crashing, we've been working to restore those numbers, and those numbers are actually coming back up. So there's more sea otters than there were, say, 30 years ago. All right. One of the many creatures that sea otters eat is the purple sea urchin. That's here, the spiny purple sea urchin. Lower populations of sea otters mean higher populations of these sea urchins, these purple sea urchins. Now, this is going to be important. Less sea otters means that you're going to have bigger numbers of sea urchins. All right, so let's see how the sea otters act as a keystone species. We've got two scenarios here, one with sea otters and one without sea otters, okay? So the picture kind of tells it all. Sea urchins eat the base of kelp fronds, cutting the kelp free and killing the kelp. So down here you can see that they'll eat right at about the base. And when they do that, the rest of this frond just floats away and dies somewhere. Under normal conditions, there are enough sea otters to regulate the sea urchins and not allow for the over-harvesting of kelp. So normally, you get these sea urchins that are eating away at the kelp, but then you have sea otters that come down and eat them, keeping everything balanced. Without sea otters, sea urchins can graze on the kelp without fear of predators. Eventually, sea urchins will cut down an entire kelp forest, destroying the ecosystem. That's what you see in these two images. With sea otters, you have this nice kelp forest that provides habitat for lots and lots of creatures. Without the sea otters, the sea urchins cut down the whole forest, leaving barrens. So all the creatures that lived there among the kelp, no longer there. Sea otters are a keystone species because without them, the entire ecosystem collapses. All right, I hope this helps. Thank you very much.